Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated.
I'm Michael from Boredom Stated.
And we've got a new series that we're coming out with, which is going to talk about certain monster types that are in role playing games and also generally famous in pop culture as well.
And today we're dealing with the eponymous werewolf.
The werewolf, lycanthropy, were creatures of any type. There's lots of history behind them, and it's an ancient concept.
True enough. They began in ancient Egypt, as far as uh, ancient Greece as well, Mesopotamia. The myth of changing people changing into animals is one of the oldest of mythologies. European folklore during the Middle Ages truly picked it up. There was a scare during witch hunts. They also hunted for werewolves. Anybody who was, anytime that a lot of death was going on, other than just war and disease, they'd blame it on a witch or a werewolf.
They would say that a man could never commit this kind of murder, but if a man turned into an animal and did it first, that makes a lot more sense. So let's have him change shape and then kill people instead of thinking that man is just not the best person.
And it wasn't just limited to the European uh, continent. In every continent, they had a different mythology based upon basically the apex predator of the area. In Africa, they had were hyenas. In India, they had were tigers. And in South America, they had were pumas and were jaguars.
Absolutely. The history of it goes back thousands and thousands of years. Serial killers, especially in the Renaissance period, a lot of times were thought of to be were creatures because, again, man would never do this, but animal would.
Yeah, it is rough. And amongst Central Asia, they also had the Turkic shaman who could supposedly transform into wolves as a special power. Now, not necessarily a curse at that point, but it's almost a gift from the gods.
Uh, there's eventually came a point where people said, well, okay, are werewolves real? And they actually have some medical explanations for it. People walking on all fours, people believing that they're werewolves. Um, Someone who may have been thought to have been raised by wolves would therefore be a werewolf. Lycanthropy itself is actually a psychological condition where someone believes that they can change into a person or change from a person into an animal or a wolf or another animal. There's also a term that the exact term I'm not positive, but if werewolfism, where you grow hair and look like an animal even though you just have excessive hair growth.
There's also one there's signs of a werewolf, well, potentially signs of a werewolf in human form. People who have unibrows, unfortunately, or who had hair growing on the palm of their hands. I believe that was some of the signs, supposedly, if the person was a werewolf in human form, of course.
Getting to our more modern history, the concept of werewolf in pop culture generally comes from the first werewolf movie, which was The Wolfman, made in 1941. Since then, we've had uh, lots of different uses of werewolves, lots of different showings of werewolves. There've been werewolf movies, but I mean, comparatively to the other kin of the dark natured monsters,
Yeah.
the werewolf is usually not among its more popular. We've got to mention the concept that was brought up in a werewolf, an American werewolf in Paris, in
Oh,
London, where we brought in the idea that the change happens and it's a very painful change.
oh yes.
That's been usually the concept, at least of more recent times. Um, a lot of the concept behind werewolfism in the years, both in the past and currently, go with the idea that you have this curse or you have this disease. And that's another thing that we want to talk about. The difference between, in different editions, they've said that it's a curse. In different editions, they've said it's a disease. I know there was at least one where they said it was both.
Mm,
And it's a very interesting idea that how you get lycanthropy, what happens with it, are you born with it, and all of that.
yeah. Now we're dealing with two systems here. Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition version of the Werewolf. Both of them are CR3, Challenge Rating 3. I'm going to go over the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons version of it. It's a relatively, it's not a particularly strong combat monster at this CR, at this level, but it does have an ace in the hole, and that its resistance, well, not resistance, its actual outright weapon immunity to anything that's not magical or silver based. Now, this is 3rd level. You're not always going to have a magical weapon in your hand, especially for the fighter or rogue types. And so going up against a monster like this, without the ability to actually permanently put it down, is incredibly scary and frightening. That basically means you're going to have to borrow a term from a MMORPG, you're going to have to tank and hope the creature wants to beat the crap out of you while your spellcasters whittle it down. Then, of course, there's the Pathfinder version.
So the Pathfinder version does not have the resistances the way we would expect them to. In lots of previous editions, they have resistance or immunity. Silver is always an important idea. In Pathfinder, instead of having a resistance to everything that isn't silver, they specifically just have a weakness to silver. Now, in both editions, if you get bit by the creature, you have to make a saving throw. In 5th edition, it's a Constitution saving throw. In Pathfinder 2, it's a Fortitude save. They're both based on con. The same exact thing happens. The values don't matter because the values are so different based on the systems that it doesn't make a difference for difficulty. But it's a DC of 12 in the 5th edition, and it's a DC of 19 in Pathfinder 2. Both of them are not super easy to make at the level, but both of them are not incredibly difficult either. So the Pathfinder 2 version, the only real special thing about it is, it hits pretty hard. It's meant to be a pack tactics creature because it gets pack tactics to do additional damage, whereas the 5th edition one doesn't. But it takes weakness to silvered weapons. So you hit it normally with regular weapons, but you do 5 extra damage when you hit it with silver. So it's not more like, as in 5th edition, it's kind of like a mini boss, like a low-level boss creature.
Yeah.
In Pathfinder, it's more of a pack creature that you're just supposed to fight a bunch of. It's got good hit points, it's got good AC, but it's overall not very strong.
Yeah. It can be fended off by a party of that level without too much special preparation. You don't have to get silver weapons, although it helps, of course.
Yeah. In 5th edition, the damage of them is also pretty weak. They generally do either a D6 or a D8 plus 2 per hit, whereas in Pathfinder, they do a D6 or a D8 plus 8 per hit. Now, you do have more hit points in Pathfinder than in 5th edition, but not by that much.
True enough. But then again, it's also, like you said, it's a pack creature. So you're having 2 or 3 of them plus flanking, and it's...
they can be devastating.
Especially if they get to your casters.
Oh, yeah. The thing is, though, in Pathfinder, it's not necessary for the casters to take on that responsibility, whereas in 5th edition, you might not even get magical weapons. You have to prepare for what werewolves, whereas in Pathfinder 2, it could be a random encounter. It should be a difficult one. Yeah. So they are used completely differently between the two systems.
Yeah. So, which do you prefer? Or which do you feel as epitomizes the werewolf in your mind?
The werewolf in my mind is more of a boss than it is a pack creature. I mean, I like the idea of it being a pack creature. If you think of it from like the movie series where it's vampires versus werewolves. In that, they're strong, but they are also more pack creatures.
Underworld, yeah.
In the Underworld series, the werewolves need to team up to take out vampires, but again, it's vampires, so it is what it is. I personally, though, feel like I would like something in between the two. So I personally prefer the 5th edition version for its rule set.
Yeah. Even though I feel it's I agree with you. The 5th edition one, that all or nothing for the silver, I might, modify that to be like resistant to it, anything other than silver, but being completely impervious changes the way encounter occurs. like I said, you had to have something to occupy them while the mages whittled them down with magic, and hope that the mages have enough spells. Whereas in Pathfinder, it's definitely you come across a bunch of them raiding a town or something like that, and it's a slightly different feel, but you don't have to prepare that much ahead of time. It's just simply you can spring it, and if you don't have silver, don't worry about it. You can still affect them. So as a boss encounter, definitely the 5th edition one. Yeah.
And finally, of course, something that I forgot to mention, both of them, we did talk about the fact that they are both a save to be able to get it. Lycanthropy itself is a curse in both of our current editions. So if you can get rid of the curse, which I believe is a 3rd level spell in both editions, or a 3rd or a 4th level spell in both editions.
Remove curse. Yeah.
Remove curse. So as a 3rd level character, you might not have access to that. So it is a big deal. Also, how affected you are if a character gets affected by lycanthropy can be a big deal. I know one of the things that in Pathfinder specifically says is that if you're affected by lycanthropy, you have to make a save, and a will save basically, to see if you can maintain control of your character. Otherwise, your character is taken control of by the GM.
Yeah, there's a little something in the monster manual, I believe, about whether or not you want to give yourself over to the curse or fight it. And it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. When you're normally during not a full moon or whatever the trigger mechanism, depending upon what the GM decides, you can be you, and then when you're changed, it goes over to the DM to do whatever he'd like. Or you can just, if you just give into it, then most likely for our NPCs that maybe join your party or just part of the story. If they give into it, then they become an evil monster and then have to be put down.
Now, it needs to be said that lycanthropy, although the way we're talking about it doesn't seem that dangerous, lycanthropy can easily end campaigns very quickly, which will bring us to the end of this video, but I need to tell a story. And Mike knows this story well, because he's the one who GM'd this story.
Do I? Let's see.
This happened about 15 or so years ago. We were playing a game. This was back in 3.5. So the 3.5 rules, lycanthropy was both a curse and a disease. You had to get rid of the disease and get rid of the curse. Okay. If you were a low-level party fighting against werewolves, you were not exactly going to be in a good situation. And we were a relatively low-level party, fighting against these werewolves. We were actually, I think, only level 4 or so when we were doing this. We did not have a very good chance against them, and 3 of the 5 members of our party ended up contracting that lycanthropy. Now, we still had time before the full moon. We could easily make it back to town. We had plenty of time, but we were playing Ravenloft. And Mike made the decision that when we were making our way back to town, we switched planes. So we switched from the place that we knew exactly how to be able to save ourselves into a plane of a giant swamp with nothing around us. We successfully found out that there was going to be a village that we could get to that might be able to save us, as the full moon was still at least a week away. However, one of the members of our party who did not get afflicted by lycanthropy wanted to go forward to make sure that we would be able to be brought in and no one would be afraid. But this party member made the active decision, after finding out that the shaman was away for another day, which meant nothing, that we would be thought of as enemies when we came into town instead of friends. So the village decided at this point, when we showed up, when we came in, no weapons drawn, no nothing. They came in thinking we were there to afflict them all with lycanthropy. Yeah. Because that is why we showed up, because our friend, our ally, told them that this was the case. Wow, that campaign ended about 20 minutes later after the battle was over. The other party member fled because, of course, he did not want to be a part of the fight, nor did he want to join us in our deaths. And that is how lycanthropy can easily end a campaign when it's derailed by the GM fucking with you.
You know, the mists of Ravenloft are mysterious, so they open and close all the time. Good times.
You know, I'm smiling, but this was not fun. This was actually a very, very annoying encounter and annoying.
You know, Dungeons and Dragons is a contact sport. And things happen. You know, sometimes you zig when you should have zagged and a punch hits you. That happens. But you know what? That's not all, the mist's fault. Sometimes your party member doesn't, not always on the same page. Specifically that guy who went in and sabotaged you. That wasn't me.
Now, that wasn't you who did that. Nor, and by the way, I will mention that one of the other members of this group
Yeah.
was there, but he was also not the person who turned on us.
Yeah, well, he never does.
Wait, what? Okay, anyway, that gets into other things. Eventually, we'll probably get around to putting up stuff and you'll be able to see what we're talking about with games. But until then, that's our edition and concept of the werewolf. If you think we missed anything, if you have your own opinions, please feel free to bring that up.
Yeah. Just hit a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will see you next time on Boredom Sated.